As I suspected, 32 flavors.
Well, good morning, good evening, wherever, whenever you are. I am here and I'm back for big game number 5, first time around. We had Wakizashi's Tea House, then we had Eric O'Sullivan, then we had Mr. MVP. It's almost like I was doing like a tour around the aficionados a little bit. And now for the conclusion issue, I get Wes. I feel like I accomplished like a hat trick, but with 4 instead of 3. Welcome to the channel,
Absolutely.
sir, and thank you for being here. This is absolutely awesome.
Well, thanks for inviting me, man. This is a great comic book. I'm very excited about talking about something that I really enjoyed. There was a lot of expectations coming into this comic book, and I would say Mark and Pepe blew those expectations out of the water.
Oh yeah, so yeah, and you know, I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, we're talking obviously, guys. Big game number 5. This is the big middle world conclusion. If you're somehow watching this, you're not in the know. He took his Wanted, his Kick Ass, the Kingsman, Starlight, Hawk, other stories I can't say until we get to spoilers. And it's basically it's like his version of a Marvel and DC crossover, and this is the conclusion issue, double size, might add, double size. So your traditional issues like 4 or 5 pages. This one's 8, and this was like what 40 some pages, lots of story, a whole lot of action. And you know what were your non-spoiler thoughts on it, Wes? Like, tell me what you thought of this conclusion issue. If you want to put out your thoughts on the story as a whole, you can go for that as well. Non-spoiler, starting first.
Well, I think it's it's really good. So Mark Miller is really a history of or a student of the history of comic books. You can tell he's a fan, and he's done a lot of things with this Miller world to really pay homage to things that he loved within DC and Marvel comics. Like obviously, Kick Ass is his love letter to Spider Man. What if
Oh
Spider
yeah.
Man didn't have the power, but still had felt the responsibility and the want to go out there and help
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
And this almost felt like his love letter to like Infinity War and Endgame, the way that it kind of all played
It
out.
felt like that. Yeah.
Except he put his Mark Miller spin on it, to where he decided those things didn't go far enough, and I'm going to take all my characters and do all these just terrible, amazing things with them. And they left you in a state at the end of issue 4 to where you're like, wow, like I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't. How do you even work with this? And he played it out really well. There's a great appearance, and then they were able to kind of undo a lot of the things that had happened, and you get this just amazing final battle. And Pepe the Raz needs all the shout outs in the world, the tip of the cap, anything that you could say to Pepe, because he makes it look so amazing.
Oh, he
And
did. He
just
really
the
did.
conclusion and all the great character moments. He's had great character moments throughout the series, but there are so many of them in this final issue, especially with Kick Ass. A lot of great character moments, but Kick Ass definitely gets the best character moments, in my opinion, and really elevated that character and just sends you away with things that he's obviously leading up to after this in different stories. Obviously the characters are going to go their own separate way and keep moving on in their own titles and everything. But he gave you just that wonderful finale, that conclusion to a story that did feel so massive that I think you could probably only do in something like a Miller World or maybe like a super massive where you have the shared superhero universe, but it's so contained that you can actually do something that highlights every character and celebrates every character and lets them be a big part of it. And I think that's one of the things that you can't really get with Marvel and DC nowadays with their events. They don't like
This one
the
feels special, unlike those ones,
yeah,
Wes, because
the
one, this
continuity
is the
doesn't work.
first big one. Because there's been like very small crossovers, small acknowledgments in the universe. Whereas Marvel, so many events every month nowadays. It's like the events find you. You want to go and seek out the events find you. Miller was like, this is the first big one because it felt like it counted, it felt like it mattered. It really felt like there was an added sense of weight and almost like a uncertainty, even at some points, because of how crazy it was.
And he plays with your emotions too. Like there's one moment after it feels like everything's right, like, oh, I can feel better now. And then he gives you another one, like, oh, come on, man. And then he gets you again, and you're like, Mark Miller's just playing with my emotions in this book.
Oh, he succeeded. And I'm glad you mentioned the whole Infinity War Endgame because I thought a little bit about that. I'm like, because this book was really the ultimate payoff to not just a lot of previous books, Wanted, Kick Ass, Starlight, even, but it's also just a payout just to like even this series because you get so much character modes. I'd even say like I feel like the character modes kind of even outweigh, and this is my thoughts. I feel like the character modes even outweigh the action. The action's really good, as intense as usual from Mark Miller. Like intense, crazy, mayhemic action is Mark Miller's style. That's like Avi says, Superman can fly, snow being white. We expect the crazy, but the character moments were so much. It was like, wow, that's cool. That's cool. That it really felt like these characters are actually like allowed to progress, which is something I feel like Marvel and DC characters, I feel like have been kind of off limits from doing, especially in the last 10, 15 years, where they'll have their character mode that seems like a progression until the next writer comes in. Where this feels like these are character modes where they're going to stick and we're going to let these heroes and villains, in some cases, grow. So did you feel like there was a little bit of that too, where it felt like, okay, we're actually finding people who can grow up and, have moments that change their lives? Did you feel like a little bit of that too?
Absolutely, because these are Mark Miller's creations, and some of these characters he hasn't written in like 10, 15 years or whatever. He hadn't done anything with them, but you can tell so much love went into it. And yes, he is progressing the characters, and the status quo following this in Miller World, specifically with the individual titles, is going to be changed dramatically for a lot of these characters. Maybe some of the characters, maybe not so much, but you can tell that. But Mark's going to continue on the story and allow this enormous moment to affect the characters for years to come. That's what makes it the more exciting, because you want more right now. And that's like the biggest thing I come out of this, not just with issue number 5, but just big game as a whole. I know we're kind of sticking to the one issue, but
no,
after this,
go ahead and expand off it.
There are stories in Miller World that I haven't read yet. And at the end of this, I was like, I need to go back and read everything. And in fact, I would like to just read it in order. And it's something I'm looking at doing now, because there are moments in this comic book that I really enjoy, but I know I would have enjoyed it better if I had read all the source material, which I didn't get to read all of Middle World.
Hey, it's all good, man. I admitted on my issue 4 review when I did with MVP that I hadn't read Empress, but now I'm going to read Empress. Now that it's all said and done, I want to read Empress. I wonder, because like I always knew Wanted. I knew Reborn. I knew blah, blah, blah. Of course, I knew Nemesis. Like that, not many characters ever mess with my mind. But Nemesis was one of the very first ones I ever truly messed with my mind. I was like, this guy's terrifying. So yeah, like you said earlier, Pepe Larraz, I feel like he really stepped it up a whole lot. I love it. Obviously, it helps he probably had more time, but just he really brought these characters. That's saying a lot, because he had to fill up a lot of great pencils from over the years. Yeah, J.G. Jones, your Greg Capullos, Goran Parlov, obviously Frank Quietly, like for
Sean Gordon Murphy.
Sean Gordon Murphy. Like, I believe I was so many great names. And yeah, I mentioned so many. This is a tall order to follow for him, and he steps up. He really did. And obviously, Giovanna Nero was colors. Really complimented his art style, especially since Giovanna had that old school with the dot style. I really like seeing that. I feel like it really fit the format story, considering the wide characters come from the mid 80s era, which is right around the time when the comics revolution happened with like Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen. It just felt like a very fitting color. So even the colors, it all felt right. So all right. I'm anxious not to get into spoilers. Are you ready to talk about some spoilers? Because it's hard. It's really
you have to do spoilers for this book if you want to talk about it. Otherwise, it's kind of generic, because almost every page, if you mention specifically what happened, it is a spoiler, because so much does happen. Like, this is a frenetically paced, kinetic comic book that doesn't stop.
Oh, it's breakneck. It's all it really feels like it feels like a really fast like veil band that just go. It's just like, holy crap, this is like, it's like you gotta like take a stop and breathe, because it's like, holy crap, it's pulse pounding, like almost like an 80s 90s action movie where the action heroes come in and kick ass. So all right, well, you know what, let's get into spoilers. And 3 and 2 and 1 and Wes. I want to hear your thoughts on some of these spoilers, because these are some big moments, and I don't even know which one you want to start, but I'll let you start, since you're the guest.
So at the end of issue 3, we saw Hit Girl with the Chrononaut, and they'd gone back in time to where the dinosaur was. And I was like, oh, they're going to go back to a few days before this happened and kind of clean things up. That's what I assumed was going to happen. And the next thing you know, there's an enormous army from the future and the past, and it threw this big curveball in there, and they show up with their entire army with that great image of the chrononaut strapped to the front of the thing that was used as a time machine. Well, Hit Girl came with them, and that was like the first really cool moment when she shows up. They're like, "Oh no, she's taken the time machine," as Wesley is kind of, I guess, negotiating with the sorcerer that's there on behalf of King Madrix or whatever.
Diabolos, yeah.
And she goes in back in the past, and I just loved it. He didn't spend too much time on it,
No,
which I thought
he
was the best part. He
quick and
just
to the point.
undid all of this stuff because Hit Girl had gone in the past with all the knowledge that she had, and it felt like a great moment. It was like a great 6 or 7 pages of them finally getting their comeback, realizing what was happening, and saving all the heroes. I was like, yeah, that's good. I'm glad he didn't sit on it too long, and he made it real fast to get to the big action moment where you have the big battle between the heroes and villains. But it was great seeing that stuff.
Oh, I agree, and I think it helped too. It was only because they made clear that the events were still like 3 days ago, 72 hours ago, versus where it's like, I guess we'll have to throw in an Endgame reference. I feel like 3 days with time makes a lot more sense than 5 years. It feels that much more like, okay, they can get away with this more because it's only 3 days. And also, Hit Girl's way of telling the heroes a plan around their attackers oncoming, like, was cool because now you got to see Huck prevent his what could have been his inevitable situation, the nightclub as well, the Holy War, seeing them pop into limos. I was like, oh, this is going down. I was like, wow, okay, this is what happened. And then all of a sudden, all these characters are together, and seeing Dave Lazowski's enthusiasm reminds me of what it was like being a reader when I saw my first big crossover. It's like, look at all these characters. That was what it felt like for me. Like when I was a lot younger, picking up my comics out of 7-Eleven or Walgreens at the Spirit Rack and seeing like an Infinity Gauntlet type of story, like, whoa, look at all these characters in the same book. I'm like, I don't know if that was like his meta response to that, but it definitely had that, at least the same type of enthusiasm. I think the enthusiasm at the very minimum was shared. See Dave living vicariously through the reader was so cool to see. It really
And that's
felt
the best
special.
moment of the book, is when he's sitting on the bench because he still missed the bus.
Yes.
He still didn't make it to the party with everybody else who aren't dead now, and they're ready to take on not only Wesley and Nemesis and their army, but also the army from the past that's actually from the future. And he's sitting there, and Cordelia comes up, and she's like, we're magic based. We actually can't be a part of this. He's like, what are you talking about? The guy's called the sorcerer. She's like, yeah, but he's not really using magic. He goes, man, you're talking in semantics. And she's like, fine, I guess it's a loophole. And then she brings to life all of the heroes that he's been reading about in comic books over the years, which we knew existed prior to 1986. And they all return to the battlefield, like that great moment at the end of Endgame where you get the portals and on your right, and they all show up. And you get that thing going on, and he's dropping a tear. And he's like, I'm going to get to join these guys. And then she gives him a suit that's like the ambassadors. And he gets to go in there and be the hero that he was always meant to be. And then you find out that people are starting to acknowledge that the reason we're here today, the reason heroes are allowed to return to this universe, is because without powers, you still put on the mask. And you still wanted to go out there and fight for people. You brought all this back. And I was like, man, what a great acknowledgement of Kick-Ass.
It was so cool. It was good to see Dave Lazowski have his comeback moment because he's kind of been out of the picture since there's a lot of like Kick-Ass sequels and Hit Girl, and he wasn't as prominent. And it felt like this was really a way of giving him his character growth, because I know we said it earlier when we were talking non-spoilers. This really felt like a character is finally not going to grow, but this is like the Robin becoming Nightwing moment for Lazowski. Now he gets to go on and become something more, and I'm happy for it because we're growing along with him and us, the readers, especially for those who have been there since the first Kick-Ass. It's a victory for those fans, those who stuck around. This is their reward. And I guess we'll have to just talk about that moment, because obviously, the big fights, it was epic, it looked intense, it looked fun, super crazy shots. We saw that the Hit Girl, I thought Hit Girl,
that was the moment where
that
he got
messed with
me.
my head. I was like,
son of a bitch.
no. I was like, no.
I was like, but it makes sense. there are repercussions for going out there and doing the right thing. She's the one that ends up dying after she saves everybody.
Yeah.
And then he pulls the rug out from underneath you. And that was actually the Hit Girl for the future or whatever that was supposed to be there. It wasn't the actual Hit Girl that saved everybody. There's two of them.
Issue 2 was the one that was with Eggsy. That was one issue. Issue 2 is like, oh, the one that was with Eggsy who stopped the plan. It's like, okay, now I get that. Okay, that actually makes sense. So I was like, okay, yeah, explains
But
why
that
they're two down
image
the road.
of the hole in her face with Nemesis, or is it Wesley's on the other
Wesley
side?
Gibson, yeah.
Yeah, it's Wesley. That was a great image. Like very well done to Pepe the Raz, and it looked fantastic. It was a jaw dropping moment. You know, you felt something in your stomach, which is I imagine what you Miller wanted you to feel. You're like,
It worked.
no, you know, and
It worked.
then you still got the great moment where basically you get the inverse shot of Wesley,
It
where he
was
takes it to the dome.
he man. I was just like, damn, this is like, and the fact that it was Hit Girl, I was like, oh, that's even cooler. Like, yeah, very smartly played by Miller. But now that we got Dave Lazuska, let's bring it back to Dave. He is now the American lead of the Ambassadors. And you know what? I think I entertained that idea when I did my issue 2 review with Wakizashi. I was like, I wonder if this could happen. I'm like, I don't think it would happen because I'm like, he's either to become the American lead or he's gonna die because he was the first. And I actually was worried he was gonna die in this issue. And thankfully he didn't. But dude, I was like, okay, this is cool to see Dave. Finally, he's moving up now. He's part of the big leagues. He now gets to be in a power group. This was awesome to see Lazuski. As we were mentioning about our vague mentions of the character who got to grow, Dave Lazuski is now one of the ambassadors. I
And
think
he's
it's safe to
powered up,
say
and he's got a suit, and he's got a new look, and
the
he's not
book can't
kick-ass anymore.
the book
He's
can't come
America.
soon enough. The ambassadors follow-up cannot come soon enough. I imagine that book's gonna be huge when that comes out. That's gonna be a big deal. My shop, all the shops in my area were already selling out quickly probably because of that particular moment. Because this is such a major thing, huge thing. And I noticed another thing too. It was cool, and I don't know if you did read Starlight, if you have not, but I'm familiar with Starlight, and it was cool to see his friends show up to assist in the big battle because it was like, wow, I remember that kid when he was a kid. Now he's an adult helping his idol. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm sure for those who are not familiar, that was cool. You understand it. But as someone who grew up with that story, it really brought it home for me. Like seeing that, I was like, wow, it all comes back around. Everything literally went around and came back around. And of course, one of my favorite moments, because I kept asking, where is she? Where is she the entire time? Because we do see some acknowledgments of where some of these characters were along the way, like the space bandits are kind of in hiding. That was cool to see. It's like, oh hey, well, this is why these characters, and not every single character was involved, and the characters that weren't involved, it was smart. It wasn't like they just said, well, they have to be involved because they're part of this universe. Every character had their place, and it made sense. Bonnie Black from Reborn, when Wesley Gibson wakes up in a dystria, and he's like, are these
That was a funny moment.
freaking gnomes? What is this? And Bonnie just from behind, whoosh, and I was just like, dude.
What did you know with no uncertain doubt? He's not coming back. He died in
He
our
is.
world, and then he died in the next.
He is donezo. So if you're worried of him, if anyone's gonna come back, it ain't gonna be Wesley. It could be the Fox, his side, his side lady. She could come back. I'm scared about what Mr. Matthew Anderson has planned too, because he kind of got dealt out pretty quickly in this. However, what he talked about, I'm like, oh, payback's gonna get very ugly.
Yeah, that's one of the things Miller did really well in this. You know, obviously, he told this huge story, and you get the satisfying conclusion. But he left meat on the bone, things that need to be explored. You know, you got Nemesis in the hospital, full body cast. He says he'll be walking again in 6 months. Apparently, he's paralyzed, and he's already got his hit list. So you know he's going to come back, and you still have King Madrix in the past waiting to hear from the sorcerer about what happens once he finds out he failed and didn't take over the future.
You're right.
He's on the table, and there's still animosity between the nightclub. They haven't figured out all their issues there. So there's plenty of places for these characters to go, and he really sent them down on their path. Obviously, the really big one is the American ambassador being Kick-Ass, and so he balanced everything perfectly.
Oh yeah, and that's saying a lot because of how much there was to deal with. Like that's not an easy feat. I can see why it could be overwhelming for the best writer. That's not an easy thing to juggle. It's probably gotta be it's gotta be hell to work with that, because it's like you want to make sure you deliver, you want to give characters a satisfying moment, especially the long time readers, but you also want to be able to bring in the new readers who can still understand it. I think it's safe to say Miller and Larraz, they succeeded with this book, and I was happy, and this is one of the rare events book, like I guess you could say compared to also like The Last Ronin, where it feels like there was a satisfactory ending and things feel nice and neat and wrapped up. But if you want to continue on, there's room for those who want to continue the journey. So, I'd like to hear your final thoughts on the issue. And what are the stories that you are not familiar with that you now want to read coming out of Big Game?
I do wish the issue was $6 rather than 8. I understand it was a double size issue, but I'm willing to forgive Mark because we did get Nightclub for $1.99, which is half price. And we got a whole
that
series
was
of
a
that.
bargain. Yeah.
So he's helped people out, and I understand it was the big finale. And Marvel and DC are kind of moving that price point, but I wish it was $6. That's my only complaint about the Goblin book.
Okay.
I wish it was just a little bit cheaper, but I understand why they did it. But it was, thoroughly satisfying. I don't think you could have asked for anything else. I knew once he murdered off all of his characters, they weren't all going to stay dead. I was like, well, he's got to bring them back, and I was like, it's going to have time travel because you got the Chrononaut. Although when the one character was dead, I was like, well, this is getting complicated. How it's going to happen? But you get the very moment where they're using his body, and even in this issue, when he sees, he's like, "That's my body." He's like, "Could you put a sheet over my head?" Or something? So there's so many great moments, and even the characters that maybe didn't get a great moment in the first 4 issues, like Huck, he shows up and he dies. He doesn't really get much, but he gets shine in this issue. So even people that would have been disappointed in the first 4 issues, like maybe he didn't use my character enough, they even got their shine. They all got their moment. And I just can't imagine anyone that was invested in the event getting through the final issue and going, yeah, that's just not what I wanted. It just didn't live up to it. I think it lived up to all the hype, and Mark Miller did a great job. As far as the stuff I want to read following this, like I said, I have a Patreon. I think I'm just going to go back and do the Miller World reading order chart that he gave out and start out with the first one. And once a week, go through the whole thing. And maybe in 2 years, I'll get to Big Game again and see how much more enjoyable it is. But I definitely want to go back and read Empress, because that's something that was completely missing. Like, it didn't really, when I saw the big reveal in issue number 4, I didn't even, I knew what I was reading, but I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
And I think it'll be much better, going back and getting to read that stuff. There's a couple other stories out there that I definitely want to check out, but that's like the really big one, because there's this enormous villain that was very, very powerful, and I would like to know some more about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, Empress is a series I want to read. I do want to read Superior as well, because I know obviously he has his fascinations for Superman-like characters. I was already a big fan of Huck. I was already a big fan of Starlight. I was already a big fan of Reborn. So it's like, okay, I gotta read Empress. And you had Stuart Immonen on there. I mean, that's no slouch right there, Stuart Immonen. And I do want to check out Space Bandits, because I never got around to that one. But
Space Bandits is good.
Seeing those two characters, I'm like, and they were not there, but it's like they were hiding for something. I'm like, what were they doing? Okay, I need to read this, because it feels like there's a thread here that I need to get some pretext on, and I'm excited to now check that out. I think for the books going forward, for when they inevitably obviously come out, obviously the Ambassadors, we already kind of mentioned that. I'm curious to see what's going to go at the Nightclub, because of the way that ended. That was a little bit sour ending for them, don't you think?
They were not happy with each other. I'm more excited about Nemesis moving forward. Once he gets back on the table, because he's already got a hit list, and I'm sure it's only going to get bigger. And he's going to have 6 months to think about an evil play. And I imagine, after 6 months, it'll be the most evil play it ever concocted. And evil Batman is a foe everyone should be scared of.
By Christmas next year were his words. Yeah. So Nemesis, whenever that comes out, that's a brace yourself, and that's saying a lot, because Reloaded really took it to another level. So
you need some Empire Strikes Back here, where the bad guys get back on the board.
Oh yeah. And maybe that could be the thing. Maybe there could be a big event Millworld book that could be the Empire Strikes Back. Maybe right now what we just saw was the A New Hope of it all. That's what I was thinking. A New Hope of it all. So we shall see. But all right, awesome. Well, guys, go check out Big Game number 5. Go if you could still get it. Apparently, it's hot on the eBay market. If
Should
not,
be.
there is a trade, and there'll probably be a second print. All coming out next month. Go read the story, and if you're just now getting the Middle World, my personal recommendations. If you can't read them all, I would say read Wanted, Kick-Ass, Nemesis Reloaded, and I would actually dare even say Starlight as well. Any final thoughts before I go? Anything you want to plug? I know you got Comics Aficionados tomorrow morning. What we got coming up on your side, Wes?
Well, I'm not sure when this comes out on your channel, but on Friday I do have a wrap up of Big Game. It's not a review of a Big Game number 5 so much as an overall view of it with Jim from Weird Science.
Yeah, I
one
watched
of
those
the-
videos. Yeah.
One of the more prolific reviewers out there. I think he's got 3,000 something comic book reviews. So he did a big overview of that and all the things that we think went right with that one. And then I have another pretty fun video talking about some of the weird stuff that happened with the MCU. But we're doing a lot of great things. We do have the Aficionados on Saturday. I've also got the Patreon with another 6 hours of podcasts every single week featuring Doc, Aaron Sparrow, and Jib as well. So we're doing a lot of great things. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite. I don't get these enough, but I'm always excited to get out there and talk to the other geeks out there.
Yeah, it lets you know how small our world truly is, and I love being able to link about comic books because it's one of those things. Comics are one of those things that even if you don't know someone, if you find out, hey, that guy he knows his comics, you can just have a conversation and just go off of that for a long time. And people on the outside think, oh, these guys are like really know each other. Like, well, not really. We have a thing
I'm in
in
the
common,
Philippines.
and you're in the Philippines, and we could talk like we've known each other because of that shared interest. Comics is one of those special mediums where you get to do that. So yeah, I'm very thankful for your time. I'm over the moon about this. So thank you for coming on here, Wes, and I will hope this is not the last time we cross paths wherever and whenever this is. And guys, once again, go check out Big Game. Have a great day, and in some cases, have a great night wherever you are. And somehow, if you're watching it, you're probably sub to us. If you somehow are not, go change that because this guy is going to cross 50K inevitably. Thank you all for watching this video. You all have a wonderful day.
But I'm not. This is where the law stops. And I start.